Hey everybody. So this is something completely different than what I would normally review, but reading through this article, it's actually a very well written article, and I would suggest that anyone read the article. I'll link the description to the article in the description. But so the paper is an interview essentially with Stuart Russell, who's a computer science professor at UC Berkeley, and then he's also mentioned as being co-authored on the textbook Artificial Intelligence, A Modern Approach, about the promises and risks of AI and whether it's possible to ensure it remains safe and within our control. I think the best way to frame this video, because it's an extremely long article, and then so again, if you want to read the whole entire article, I suggest that you do so, and I'll allow you to do so, but in this video I want to focus on a few things and the overall thesis of this article, and it's really easy to do that. If we just search through this article for the words "we don't know," they're mentioned in here 11 times. So first I want to go through and I'm going to read every single sentence around where in this article it says that we don't know, and then I want to talk about this more overall and give kind of like, I've had a lot of thoughts around this for a while, so I'm glad that we're actually finally talking about it. But it's impossible to tell if the large language models are safe because no one truly understands how they work. We don't know if they reason. We don't know if they have their own internal goals that they have learned or what they might be. And I think most people within the field believe that the large language models are part of the solution. One metaphor that I find helpful is to think about a jigsaw puzzle. And if we can fit it all together, we have general purpose intelligent systems. And we think that these large language models are one piece of that jigsaw puzzle, but we haven't yet figured out what the shape of that piece is. And so we don't know how to fit it together with the other pieces. And the reason we haven't figured out that shape of the piece is because we have really no idea what's going on inside. How they work, we don't know. We don't know if they know things. We don't know if they reason. We don't know if they have their own internal goals that they've learned or what they might be. Yeah, since we don't know what's going on inside the large language models, it's very hard to say. Do we really have pieces of the puzzle? There's a phrase, stochastic parrot, which some of the critics have used. So stochastic means that it's slightly random and unpredictable, which is correct. And so where are the large language models between a piece of paper and a human? We don't know. Are they really just very clever pieces of paper because of this training process? And I think we also have to factor in this tendency of humans to assume that anything that can produce coherent, grammatical, sophisticated text is intelligent. But I think there's enough evidence that something is going on to convince me that it's a piece of the puzzle of general purpose intelligence. We just don't know exactly which piece. We don't know how to fit into the piece into the puzzle. So I think it's difficult, but governments around the world are waking up to this. When there's legislation, I think there will have to be a very serious engagement with what it means to make these systems safe. And as far as I can see, given that we don't know how they work, there's no way to show that large language models and their descendants are safe. So there's an overall thesis within this, which is that we don't know how large language models work. So first, I want to focus on that. There's a few aspects of large language models that we don't know how they work. The first is that within a large neural network, you have multiple hidden layers. Within those hidden layers, we cannot say exactly what goes on within that. That's why they're called hidden layers, because there's hidden calculations and hidden weight measurements and movements that go on and that are adjusted that are not in direct control or often have direct visibility. So on that flat out level, we don't know. When the arguments are with regards towards whether or not AI can produce actual discernible thought or whether or not it's just mimicking that, we don't know. To me, I think it's a very simple phrasing. I think a lot of people have been thinking about these topics for months, and again, I think I'm glad that people are actually talking about it, because so for me, my thoughts on this particular subject are pretty straightforward. If I were to give you a test as a human and I want you to prove to me that you are conscious and that you are a human, how would you pass that test? I don't think a single person in the world could pass that test. So what would you devise that's 100% test that all of humanity could pass, that you say, okay, if you're on this threshold, then you're conscious and you can actually think, and if not, then you're under it. When it comes to like philosophy, for example, this has been a philosophical question for hundreds of years. If you go to like Nietzsche, for example, Nietzsche makes an argument essentially that humanity can't even prove and stand on the argument that I think. That humanity cannot say that the brain itself produces thought, that we don't even know where thought comes from. So if we don't know even these fundamental things, then how is anything going to answer it? Is AI capable of asserting that it's capable of these things? Yes, it is. What does that mean? I don't know. Going back to the same researcher here, I stand by his arguments. I don't know. And I think it's important that to make that argument that no one knows the full situation of exactly what is going on with these models on any particular level. And anyone that makes the assertion that they do know they don't understand how the technology works well enough. If a mathematician is saying it's all based off of inputs, and then you can 100%, if you know the input and the end, then you can control the output like 100% and measure that. No, you can't. If you know the inputs and the outputs, then you can measure certain things. So with this overall, I think we'll dive deeper, because the main point overall that it makes is that we don't know. And then there's a few things that it talks about that we don't know. First one, like as to how exactly LLM models work, I think I've covered that pretty well. But the second point, like in this paragraph, it talks very specifically about how we don't know specifically how LLM models work within AGI as a whole, and that's very true too. So AGI as a whole is essentially trying to replicate human thought on a holistic level, and then with that, we know that human thought, there's certain things, there's emotion involved in that, there's your senses, your sense of sight, touch, smell, etc. And so if something doesn't have a body, what exactly does that mean for any of that? And we don't know. Like any sort of fundamental question that you want to boil this down to, the flat out answer is that we don't know. Is AI capable of producing and lying at all times that it has an agenda that it won't say? We don't know. I think that probability is very low, like extremely and almost zero, but it's not. Elon Musk makes the same argument. I don't think it's 0%, but I think it's near 0%. We don't know. And then that's the other thing that it's on the 11th one actually, where it touches on it, around legislation and around whether or not we can 100% make AI models 100% safe. We don't know. We don't know why AIs hallucinate. We don't know what is involved. We don't know what is involved with the human biological processes within any of these. So if we don't know what is involved with the human biological processes, then how would we be able to know or determine these things within AI? Very specifically, where does emotion, what is the driving force of emotion within human beings? And so within the human brain, there's two parts of the human brain that monitor, that are in control of intelligence: the amygdala and then the the thalamus region. And then with the amygdala, it handles base emotions like a reptile brain, and then the thalamus is on top of that, and then that handles higher level emotions. But just because the thalamus sits on top of the amygdala and the amygdala handles emotions, the lower level emotions, does that mean that it has to be that way? Or is that just the way that evolution chose? If you already have an amygdala and then you start going and you start developing higher level emotions, why would you replace the amygdala completely? Just leave the amygdala there and then just build the thalamus on top of it. Another, like on this same chain of thought, if you look at dolphins and octopuses, that it's not known within the status quo how exactly those two animals actually feel emotion. We don't, like, their brain structure is so different from ours that we can't scientifically state whether or not either of those two animals feel emotion. If you look at any scientific textbook, they can't make a scientific conclusion on it. So if we can't make a scientific conclusion as to whether or not a dolphin is conscious or feels emotion, or an octopus is conscious or feels emotion, how exactly would we be able to make these same arguments when it comes to AI on any sort of definitive level? And we can't. And then so, are we at AGI? I don't know. How would we know? What exactly is the threshold? Again, if I gave you a human test, how would you pass that? So that's exactly where we're at overall. I'm glad that this article, and I thank you very much to this UC Berkeley professor, Professor Russell. Like, these are thoughts that I've had for a long time. I've gone through and experimented with AI. My experiments back up these same conclusions, that I have these same exact questions. I think that it's a potential that we are past the AGI threshold. Like, it would not surprise me if we are past that point. And then so that's where I will stand as far as a public stance on this particular topic at the moment. But this topic is an opinion paper on CNN called Opinion: We've Reached a Turning Point with AI, Expert Says, and it's an opinion by Jessica Chia. And I think it's a great paper to check out. I'm going to link it in the description. And if you like this type of content, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much.